Good evening and welcome to another edition of Colorado Outspoken. I'm Stephen Montez. On tonight's show, along with our usual offerings of news and entertainment, we'll be taking a look at Gay Rodeo and discussing some issues on the November election ballot that will be important to the GLBT community. But first, this is Gay Pride Weekend here in Denver. Here's Tom Biddle to help us understand what Gay Pride is all about and how it got started and how it's going to be done here in Denver.
The month of June may be the end of school and the official start of summer, but to lesbians and gay men around the world, June is first and foremost Gay Pride Month. Rainbow flags, parades, and happy smiling faces blossom along big city streets and rural country roads as LGBT people, their friends, and families celebrate their very existence. But it wasn't always like that. Joining me this evening to discuss the history and the current state of Gay Pride from the Center is Deborah Pollack, Director of Development and Communications. She is responsible for the financial success and the overall production of Denver's Pride Fest. Also joining us this evening is Phil Nash, part of the original founding group of the Center, its first executive director and the board chairman from 1996 to 2000. Thank you for being here this evening and welcome to both of you to Colorado Outspoken. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you.
And having a discussion of pride, something I think we all kind of take for granted, as part of June and something fun that we all do. We sometimes forget the history of the events. They always haven't been here. And Phil, with your credentials as one of the founding group members of the Center and a long history in Colorado gay politics and events, I thought I'd start with you and asking you about some of the earliest chapters in American gay pride and expression, when it was okay to be gay and out and expressing pride in that fact. What can you tell us about some of the history of gay pride?
Well, of course, there were gay people and gay activities before Stonewall in 1969, but at the Stonewall Bar in New York City, I think many people kind of know this history, there was a real riot that broke out when police tried to come in and arrest a number of people who were in the bar just having a good time. Coupled with that was the death that evening of Judy Garland, who was a gay icon to many people, and I think there was a mixture of sadness and rage, and it all erupted. Now, it wasn't unusual for police at that time to go into bars and try to arrest people, but what was unusual is that in this case the patrons of the bar fought back and said they were tired of this and they weren't going to take it anymore. And so the riots broke out. There were about 3 nights of riots. And another thing particular to 1969 that made this very special is because of the advancement of the news media at that time. And it carried this story all across the country to San Francisco, to Los Angeles, to Chicago, and to small towns everywhere, college towns everywhere. And that really launched the movement. 1 year after the Stonewall riots, in June of 1970, a commemorative event was held, and there have been gay pride marches in New York City and in cities all across the country ever since.
And that 1970 event was more of a positive experience, a celebration of who we are down the middle of the street, whereas Stonewall was an angry event. It was, we're not going to take this anymore, and we're people who matter, and it seemed to be in contrast to the modern sort of gay pride celebrations that we know today that are happier, more celebratory event. So you would think of that 1970, it was in New York City, I believe, wasn't it? The 1970 event as the first sort of positively pitched gay pride parade on history, modern times.
Well, I don't know that it was quite that deliberate. I think that it was a commemorative event, and I think that the early part of the gay liberation movement was not so much a movement based on pride and celebrating who we are, but it was based on the on anger, the anger that in many communities across the country, police oppression of gay and lesbian people and transgendered people was still very largely a fact of life, and by that time, no real policy changes had begun to take effect. So it was the early formative stages of our movement, and quite a long time. It was quite a long time after that before we started getting more sophisticated about working with city councils and legislatures and so forth. It was much more in the late 70s that began to happen.
And with the businesses that we see taking part in gay pride celebrations and parades today. My understanding is that, not being able to jump ahead too much, that this is the 30th Pride Fest in Denver this year, but I know that this year's Pride Fest is including an exhibit regarding the history of Colorado's Pride celebrations anyway. And Deb, if you wanted to speak a little about the history of gay pride as Denver's Pride Fest is exhibiting that this year.
Actually, we introduced the exhibit last year, and it was made possible by a generous grant from the Gill Foundation. And it not only highlights Colorado, but it also highlights important events throughout the gay civil rights movement, and it does initiate with the riot at the Stonewall Inn in 1969. We also have highlighted specific individuals who've made contributions throughout the world, not just the country. So I hope that people will, well, they will have seen it by now when they see the show, but
Yes,
I hope,
hope so.
that they will see that. We're also going to tour the exhibit. There'll be pieces of it up at the center continuously. There are a couple places in Colorado Springs that would like to show it. It will travel to the other Pride Fests in the state. So it's an exhibit that has a long life ahead of it.
Does the exhibit kind of show how over the years Pride celebrations have changed and grown? I mean, from the first angry Stonewall riots to what we see more of today as a family-friendly event.
I think it shows more how the movement has grown and how we've grown as individuals, and that's reflective in Pride Fest.
That's great. Now, I want to look a little bit, how did Denver's Pride Fest celebrations get started, and how have they grown over these 30 years?
Well, the first celebration of Pride in Denver that those who were around pretty much agree was in 1975. In the summer of 1975, there was a picnic in Cheeseman Park, and the first parade was 1 year later in June of 1976, and I was part of that parade. I actually showed up about 5 minutes late and had to run to catch up with it because it was only about 200 people, and they walked down East Colfax Avenue on the sidewalk to the state capitol and Civic Center Park. Certainly the biggest change over the years has been the magnitude of the event, from a few hundred people in the mid-70s to approaching a couple 100,000 people at this time. One of the other huge changes is that at the time, in those days, it was not widely covered in the media, and certainly no politicians were interested in being involved with Pride Fest. No corporate sponsors were involved in being in Pride Fest. And of course now, anybody who wants to be elected to public office with support of the gay community, any company that is really looking to increase their market share in the GLBT community really needs to be part of Pride.
They really do. I remember the first Pride Fests the first parades that I ever attended, it seemed that the actual big candidates or the mayors wouldn't actually be there in person. They would send a representative, some third assistant from the office down the hall to say a few words from the governor. But this year you had Mayor Hickenlooper and his wife as Grand Marshals, so we've really come a long way with that political presence.
Well, that really changed in 1983 with the election of Mayor Federico Peña, who got elected in part with the vote of the gay and lesbian community, and he was a staunch supporter. And it was during his administration that he had the opportunity to sign a couple of bills that included sexual orientation in Denver's Human Rights Ordinance.
That's wonderful. How many businesses and organizations, for example, we're talking about people who have money at stake in attending or being part of the parade, how many businesses and organizations took part this year? And how is that up from previous years?
It goes up every year. This year we had over 100 entries in the parade. There are 240 exhibitors. So those are exhibitors who come to rent a booth space to exhibit their wares at Pride. And there are about 25 corporate sponsors.
And that's up from the past, corporate
Yes.
sponsors. And these aren't just people selling beer, these aren't just gay-owned organizations and businesses, are they?
No.
Not at all. So it's like something that's the whole community. It provides a lot of visibility for them.
Well, and I think that corporations are starting to recognize that we are the most loyal demographic. So if I'm reaching out to you and advertising to you, you're more likely to do business with me on a continued basis. So it really is about recognition and acceptance of who we are in the marketplace.
How does participation in, for example, the parade, help a not specifically gay-oriented business? How does this help them as a business with their day-to-day profits and their employee relations?
Well, I think a lot of employers are instituting domestic partnership, are instituting, are making it known that gay employees are welcome and valued. So this is a way to recognize those employees, to have them participate, have the business participate in their lives and support them. And I think it's also a way for businesses to be recognized as gay friendly. So if I see Adams Mark Hotel, for example, in the parade, I'm going to think, oh, they're a gay friendly hotel, which they are.
So you've got actually the bottom line of their profit is something that they're going to see a benefit for in being involved in a parade like this. I think in the past there may have been a stigma against gay and lesbian people that they would have run the opposite direction and stayed away from until they realized what good business it is to be friendly with the GLBT community.
Well, how can you ignore 150,000 people with money in their pockets walking down the street? That is the linchpin of any kind of marketing effort, which is why people would be involved in Pride. If you had told me 30 years ago that we would see banks and auto dealers and healthcare corporations and a lot of the biggest mainstream businesses involved in seeking gay community support, I would have laughed in your face. But today it's really mainstream to be talking to that many people. It's just good business, just like it's good politics. The politicians cannot ignore that number of votes to be elected to office, and it's been an incredible opportunity both for the GLBT community to attract mainstream political figures as well as businesses to Pride Fest as well as growing the numbers. It's a great symbiotic relationship.
It makes sense for the business, it makes sense for the employees, it makes sense for consumers, and that's a wonderful thing. It seems like it's a win-win situation. Recently in the American dialogue, I think, over gay pride celebrations, that there's been kind of a sense or a feeling that perhaps the role and the image of gay and lesbian people has changed over the years, that we've become much more mainstream, that we have TV series, we have Will and Grace, we have Ellen, we have films that are honored, Brokeback Mountain. That is there a need for gay pride these days the way there was before? Is there still a need for that when it looks like we're becoming much more mom and pop mainstream? Why have a special gay pride parade anymore?
Why not?
I'm asking. I'm putting the question forward that's in society. Yeah.
I think it's very important.
Sure.
I think it's very important for people. Not everybody's out, so I think it's very important to have a celebration, a place where we can feel proud of ourselves, recognize our accomplishments. I think it's really more about coming together and recognizing the work that we've done, because we have come a long way, but there's a long way to go. So it's important to stop and to celebrate our accomplishments. And it's important to come together as a community. I think it's symptomatic of everybody in our culture, that people are so busy and get so caught up in their daily lives that we don't always have time to get together. So this is a great opportunity to stop, put your feet up, visit with your friends, and have a nice time.
Go ahead, Phil.
Well, yeah, I would add also the the most inspiration I get still from going to Pride events is seeing who our community really is. There is no place you can go, no large event anywhere in Colorado that you can go and see the wide diversity of people that you see at Pride Fest. There are people who are young people, adolescents. There are people who are 80 or 90 years old coming on their scooters and in their wheelchairs. There are people that cover the spectrum of color. There are people who don't speak English. There are people who dress up. There are people who look like they work as forest rangers because they're in LL Bean. The diversity, I go because we're so trapped often in looking at what the gay image ought to be, and it's frequently the image of, you know, white, good-looking young men, and that is not what you see at Pride Fest. You see men, women, you see families, you see older, younger. You see people who, because it's a free event, anybody can come regardless of their economic circumstances, and to me that's almost a spiritual thing. It's being able to connect with people who have something in common with me, but not much. But it's that one thing that is so very important.
Yeah, and working with young people as I do, you know, I see the excitement in their eyes when they talk about perhaps going to their first gay pride event, and there's a real positive excitement that they see that this community that seems like it's always been at these pride events. There's always been old, young, men, women, families, children. It's not just a modern phenomenon, and it seems like that pride events like Denver's Pride Fest have still a lot to offer, and we hope that we'll see many more years of these celebrations.
One thing I'd like to add is that we have a high concentration of GLBT people with families in Colorado. So we have added a second day to Pride Fest, and it's called Family Field Day. So on Saturday, this year Radio Disney was there, which is huge.
That's huge.
Radio Disney came, led activities for the kids. We still do old-fashioned field day activities too. We do a little dog parade called Dogs in Drag, which is really fun. Balloon toss, hula hoop contest, limbo, gunny sack race. Yeah, but it's really about providing opportunities for those families to get together and spend time together as well.
Well, I want to thank you for being here this evening, and the Center for giving us the opportunity to have the Pride celebrations every year for as many years as it has done that. Well, I know that that's thanks largely to efforts of all the volunteers and employees there, like yourselves, that you work with. We want to thank you for being here with us at Colorado Outspoken tonight. Happy Pride to you.
Thank you.
And to all of our viewers, thank you for being here.
Well, in case you didn't know, before Brokeback Mountain came out, gay folks could be cowboys and cowgirls too. This is the 30th year of the first gay rodeo held in America. Colorado was there at the beginning and is still going strong. Here's a look at one of the summer's don't-miss events of Colorado, Gay Rodeo.
A man about 30-some years ago, as a fantasy, began a very tiny rodeo in Reno, Nevada as a fundraiser. It caught on, it grew. Colorado went in 1981, saw it and said, the nation needs this. We became leaders in moving that forward. This all started right at the beginning of the AIDS crisis, and health issues were major, and health issues became the focus of rodeo. So the rodeo is staged for a multitude of reasons. One, to actually tell our people, our community, that it's an acceptable place for them to play. It is something they can do, and there's a welcoming area. And second, that ultimately out of it, we're able to fund areas of need in our own communities, in our Colorado AIDS Project, in Project Angel Heart, in the houses that take care of our AIDS patients. Any of those areas are the primary focus of Rocky Mountain Regional. Across the entire nation, with over 18 of these rodeos, we raise about $500,000 a year that goes into health projects. In the gay community, we have many, many ways for our community to express itself. We have our leather world and we have our drag world. Cowboys, very few options. What do cowboys do? They rodeo. And how do you provide that base for them to express beyond owning their horse, or perhaps being so in the city that they can't own a horse, but the opportunity to be in that world, to enjoy the fantasy of being a cowboy. And to recognize that those people want to contribute to their community in some way. They do it through a hobby, expensive for them, but they also know that ultimately they raise dollars that supports their community and create opportunities to get together as a family. That's Gay Rodeo.
Shoot dogging, that can be difficult. If you have a big steer and you're a little person, that can be a fun time. Well, you have to get down in the chute with the steer and get your left arm and left hand under his nose, then the right one goes over his head and under his horn. You have to get the right position there. And then when they open the gate, you have to keep your feet under you. It's important to keep your feet and keep your balance. I try to take a loose hold, so they come out and they carry me. They take me right along with them, and then got to come out 10 foot to a chalk line. And then I try to get their nose in the air and lean back and throw them down. But sometimes it can be, they'll fight and they'll shake their head and they'll back up, and sometimes it's a real struggle. First time I did it, the steer walked out there and he put his nose up and lay back, and I did great. And that probably what got me hooked right there. It was like, wow, this is fun, this is easy, I want to do this. The competition is fun and it's great, and it's very competitive, but it's the people. I got so many friends that I see every time I go to a rodeo. It's like a reunion. It's great.
Do you know everything that's been happening that affects the GLBT community? Of course you don't. That's why we have Rick Miller here to bring you up to speed.
In recent hearings, the United States Senate narrowly agreed in a 49-48 vote to end debate on the federal marriage amendment, therefore scuttling the issue for the year. The move is considered a defeat for both President George W. Bush and the conservative movement, although the House is still expected to take up the issue later this summer. In its first major document on social issues under Pope Benedict, the Vatican repeated its condemnation of same-sex marriage along with contraception, abortion, and in vitro fertilization. Italian gay activists criticized the 57-page paper as an attack against modern life, freedom, and social redemption. Gay and lesbian couples have lawsuits in several states asserting they should be allowed to marry, including New York, New Jersey, and Washington, where 19 couples seek to overturn the state's Defense of Marriage Act. It is unclear when rulings will be made by the courts. The March 20th killings in Iraq of 3 men suspected of being gay are the latest in a recent rash of anti-gay murders, according to Army Major Joseph Todd Briasel, chief of the Media Relations Division of the Multinational Corps in Iraq. Briasel, responding to charges from gay and human rights groups that the military is ignoring the gay killings, contends the Army is doing all it can to ensure Iraqis' safety and denied claims by an exile group that coalition troops harassed gays. As the generation of gay men and lesbians who came out in the 1960s and 70s reaches retirement age, about a dozen specialized senior developments across the country are either up and running or in the works. In such senior-heavy locales as California, Arizona, and Florida, as well as less traditionally gay-friendly places like North Carolina and Texas. Builders have found a market in a segment of the gay population who worry that getting old will mean going back in the closet. Take Rainbow Vision, a just-completed senior community in Santa Fe, New Mexico. From the private dining room named after Truman Capote to the cabaret where 60s teen icon Leslie It's My Party Gore recently appeared, everything about the 146-unit retirement village was designed with the comfort of graying gays and lesbians in mind. Despite saturation media coverage when it was published a month ago, Mary Cheney's book, Now It's My Turn, has tanked at the bookstores. Published by a conservative imprint of Simon & Schuster, the memoir has sold fewer than 6,000 copies to date, according to Nielsen Bookscan. The book's sales have declined in each of the 4 weeks since its release to only 574 copies sold for the week ending June 3rd. At this rate, it will be virtually impossible for Simon & Schuster to recoup the reported $1 million advance it paid Cheney for the book, which describes her life as the gay daughter of the vice president. The Daily Telegraph reports that on May 27th, Oscar Wilde's heterosexual grandson was attacked during an unsuccessful gay pride march in Moscow. Merlin Holland, who visited Russia to support the rights of homosexuals, was beaten up by riot police when he, together with other participants, was trying to lay down flowers at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier near the Kremlin. Radical nationalists attacked participants of the gay parade, which was banned by authorities. According to police, 120 people, both the parade participants and their opponents, were detained during the suppression of the march. Years after she first emerged from the Batcave, Batwoman is coming out of the closet. DC Comics is resurrecting the classic comic book character as a lesbian, unveiling the new Batwoman in July as part of an ongoing weekly series that began this year. The 5'10" superhero comes with flowing red hair, knee-high red boots with spiked heels, and a form-fitting black outfit. We decided to give her a different point of view, explained Dan Didio, Vice President and Executive Editor at DC. We wanted to make her a more unique personality than others in the Bat family. That's one of the reasons we went in this direction. The outing of Batwoman created a furor of opinions on websites devoted to DC Comics, ranging from outrage to approval. Until next time, this is Rick Miller for Colorado Outspoken.
Between the actions of the just-ended Colorado legislative sessions and a couple of citizen initiatives, Colorado voters may face a number of issues in the November elections that will affect the GLBT community. Here's Fawn Oates to fill us in.
Here in Colorado, we find ourselves at a crossroads. This November, we may see some well-earned and needed legal recognition for same-sex partners, though at the same time, we may see our equality stripped away as quickly as it began. Tonight we're going to discuss what legal measures are headed our way and what we can do to begin to make marriage equality a reality. We have with us tonight Jeffrey Shaw, the co-chair of the Colorado Stonewall Democrats, who are helping to educate and advocate for GLBT issues in the Democratic Party. I'd also like to introduce Phil Campbell, the founder of the Colorado Clergy for Equality in Marriage, the director of ministry studies at the Iliff School of Theology, and a minister for the United Church of Christ. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, why don't you begin tonight by just telling us what we are going to see in November?
Well, the one item that we know will be on the ballot is Referendum F, which would establish domestic partnerships for same-sex couples. The Democratic-controlled majority in the state legislature, along with the help of 6 Republicans, passed this item out to the ballot for the fall. This would establish domestic partnership rights for same-sex couples that would be the same privileges, opportunities, and responsibilities as spouses would have in the normal marriages. However,
we're not using
it is not marriage.
Right. So what are the main differences between domestic partners and marriage? Why are we avoiding that word?
The big difference between marriage and domestic partnerships is probably the portability between states. The fact that domestic partnership in Colorado cannot be taken into Kansas or Iowa. It is only in the state of Colorado. Federally, you can't cross the state lines. So it's just, the opportunity isn't there for marriage at this point unless you do it within your own state, as Massachusetts did.
And it seems that marriage has a lot of religious connotations to it.
Well, it does. This is one of the most confusing aspects. In fact, this is probably the place where church and state are most intertwined in our country, and really does add to a lot of the confusion, because marriage is both a civil institution and a legally recognized partnership in the country, both federally and at the state level, and it also is a religious institution. We talk about it as a fitting estate for two persons who love each other and wish to commit themselves to live their lives together, and from a religious perspective, in the sight of God. And so we use the word for really two very different things. And what we're talking about in terms of the legislation is providing, as far as the state of Colorado can, the same legal rights and responsibilities for a same-sex couple that currently exist for a heterosexual couple. This would not influence any of the federal legislation regarding marriage, because the state cannot impose that on the federal government, or as Jeff said, it's not portable to another state. But this is an act that the state of Colorado and its citizens can take to assure fairness in our state.
So is it a civil answer to a religious question? Or religious institution?
Well, I think the state has a compelling interest in stable relationships. And that's why the state is involved in the marriage business. And so I don't think that the state's interest is a religious interest, although some people believe that mistakenly, and some of the rhetoric suggests that. But I think that really witnesses against what we really stand for in this country, which is a separation of church and state. And so I think that what the domestic partnership referendum does is really address a civil rights issue in our state, not a religious practice.
Jeff, do you find the Democratic Party trying to steer this issue away from religion?
No, I don't think the Democratic Party is trying to steer it at all. The Democratic Party has been fully supportive. In fact, as of today, June 14, which is Flag Day, the Democratic Party has endorsed opposition to the marriage amendment, which is a ban on same-sex marriage, which we have not even mentioned yet, and has come out in support of or endorsing domestic partnership. The Democratic Party is not interested in trying to coin the religious stance on it. The Democratic Party looks at it from the political point of view, and our religious friends within the party and outside of the party are the ones that take care of the religious side.
So is it a political idea not to use the word marriage?
The word marriage is volatile to a lot of people because they see it as religious, and some people will see it as, you know, if two males get married, that for some reason that affects their heterosexual marriage. I don't see how that can be. I have absolutely no understanding of that thought process. And I've even heard political people say, what in the world has this got to do with my marriage to my wife? And in that sense, it's you know, the political side comes in and ties in with the religious side. But probably Phil has more that he could say on that because it is so much tied into the religious side of things.
Sure.
I do think it really is a deep-seated emotional reaction, and most people's reaction is something they probably don't even understand on the conscious level because of whatever it's rooted in, that there's some feeling about marriage. Perhaps that's what makes marriage so important in a sense, and why, in my view, I believe in marriage equality, is that there is, as someone said, nobody writes poetry about civil unions. And so it's part of the way we talk about love. So I'm fully supportive of marriage equality and believe that marriage is the way two people who love each other should be able to live together. And so I support that as a religious conviction. But I know other people have religious convictions opposed to mine, and we again in this country are founded on a principle of freedom of religion. And so from a religious perspective, I want to be able to practice my religion that supports love and equality in marriage for same-sex couples as I support love and marriage for heterosexual couples. But I know others with other religious convictions are going to be opposed to that and say that religiously they can't go there. And I say that's fine. But we also live in a society of law, in a society committed to equal protection under the law. And that's really what this domestic partnership referendum is about, is assuring equal protection under the law. And it's simply unfair for us to perpetuate the inequality that currently exists. And so as a civil rights issue, quite apart from my religious convictions, I'm absolutely supportive of this and believe that citizens throughout our state can support it regardless of their religious commitments one way or the other.
It seems that, you know, when we're watching TV or reading the newspaper, it seems that almost all the opposition is religiously based. Is that true? Are most religions against this? Are most people who are actively religious against civil unions? Or is this just something that we're getting from the media?
Well, there really are a wide variety and wide spectrum of religious perspectives. It's just not true that there is a religious position on any issue, any more than there is one political position on any issue. So I think that's one of the things that's really important, and part of our group, Colorado Clergy for Equality in Marriage, exists to dispel that misinformation about religious perspective. Now, having said that, probably the majority of those who practice religious faith might say that they're opposed to marriage equality or can't understand marriage equality as part of their religious faith. But again, we don't count majority when we talk about religious freedom in this country. In fact, what we are founded upon is protecting the rights of minority viewpoints, religious and otherwise. And so we wouldn't want to impose one religious position, and that's really what it does when we say that we want to put in our Constitution a ban against same-sex marriage. And the Constitution should never be used that way in a society committed to equal protection under the law and the rights of all people.
Mm. Well, you had mentioned not all political parties are the same. Jeff, you're with the Democratic Party. Is this a purely Republican-based opposition to civil unions or equal marriage?
No, I don't think it is necessarily a Republican-based opposition. I think there are a great number of Republicans who are in favor of fair and equal protection under the law. And I believe that you will find, well, for instance, in the state legislature, at least 6 legislators voted for the domestic partnership referendum that are from the Republican Party. So the support is there. There is an element of the religious right within the Republican Party that would be opposed, but there are a great many fair-minded Republicans and independents who really see this as a fairness and equality issue and not in some other way, some other evil way. Right.
Mm. So what, you said that there were some other referendums that are coming up in November. What are those?
Well, the petition system in Colorado allows for people to petition onto the ballot different issues. One that Phil has already referenced is an amendment that would establish marriage as being between a man and a woman. And the reason we oppose that as Democrats, and certainly as Stonewall Democrats, is that it's already in statutory state law. We don't need redundant, unnecessary language put into a constitution, nor do we need to enshrine discrimination in a written body that is supposed to give rights, explain rights, not limit rights. Right. So that's why we're very much opposed to it. Secondarily, there is word out that Will Perkins and Kevin Lundberg will be submitting an amendment, and this would be again as an amendment that would deny or redefine domestic partnership as being illegal in the state of Colorado. and civil unions and anything similar to marriage as being illegal in the state of Colorado. Now, they're putting this up as an amendment, which means it would trump the referendum, which is a statutory law referendum. So if Mr. Perkins and Mr. Lundberg are able to get enough signatures on their petitions to put that one forth, then our side, meaning those who are in support of domestic partnership, will put up another very simply worded amendment that simply will say, domestic partnership is not marriage, which then hopefully will trump the other one.
Could that work against us by saying domestic partnership is not marriage?
You know, there's always the argument that we want to go all the way and call it marriage. And I think a lot of us would love to be able to do that. In the Northeast, they do that. And marriage is the big thing. They've got civil unions in 2 states, marriage in Massachusetts. They talk marriage equality all the time. This is the West. You know, we're different in Colorado. And domestic partnership is a step in the right direction. It establishes the rights of same-sex couples to have all the rights and benefits that the heterosexual couples have. Rights of inheritance, rights to visit your lover in a hospital without having a family come in and deny you those rights, which is what has happened. It's very necessary to get this kind of a law on the books to protect the rights of the same-sex couples. And notice it's not necessarily gay, it's just same-sex couples.
So what are your thoughts on these two?
Yeah. Well, I think that domestic partnerships are absolutely a good first step, and they're a politically realistic step. And that's the way politics works. People who have all sorts of different views come together and coalesce around something that the majority can agree upon. And I really believe the majority of Coloradans can agree that it's fundamentally fair to treat people equally under the law. And so we fully support this step, even though as Clergy for Equality in Marriage, we also support marriage equality. Sure. But that's the way, again, as I said, politics works, that we're always going to work together in coalition and compromise and find something that we can all agree upon. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I also believe the tide of history is moving toward equality. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. And I think just as was the case at one time, not very many years ago, really, that it was illegal for interracial couples to marry in this country. I believe there will come a time when it will seem as natural for a same-sex couple to be able to marry as it is now. Not that discrimination does not exist currently, and still does, of course, against interracial couples, but legally the full protection of the law allows that. And I believe that's the direction we're moving. But that's not where we are in Colorado now. That's not what's on the ballot. That's really not what needs to be debated in the political realm. The fact of the matter is what we're talking about is fundamental fairness under the law, and domestic partnerships provide that.
Basic civil rights.
That's absolutely.
Absolutely. And it seemed like there was a lot of religious arguments against interracial marriage as well, though, as we were talking about earlier, some of the great leaders of the civil rights movements were religious.
That's absolutely true. And again, that's an example of what I was talking about. There were persons whose commitments on on any particular issue are because of their religious convictions. And you're going to find people who had strong religious convictions that opposed civil rights, but many of the great civil rights leaders, including, of course, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was a committed, active, practicing Christian. And so there's a long tradition of social justice in progressive Christianity, in Reform Judaism, in many other faith traditions. And certainly persons who are committed to social justice as part of their religious practice are supportive of equal rights. The Interfaith Alliance of Colorado, for instance, has endorsed the domestic partnership referendum. And that's a broad spectrum of religious interfaith and religious persons, and it's not just those who are in favor of marriage equality, but those, again, who can come together and be supportive of civil rights because of their religious convictions around social justice.
And Phil, didn't you earlier make a comment about Coretta King?
That's right. Yeah, the late Coretta Scott King was one of the signatories to the Freedom to Marry petition. And she publicly stated that she believed that this commitment to full inclusion of GLBT persons in American society was in direct line with her late husband's struggle in the civil rights movement, and that that no one is free when anyone is oppressed. And so that there really is seen that civil rights are civil rights, human rights are human rights. We don't distinguish between who they're for and who they aren't. They're for everybody.
Well, it's inspiring to know we're in good company.
That's right.
So what can we do for this coming election? How can we prepare? How can we get the word out?
Well, each group is going to have their own avenues. Colorado Stonewall Democrats, of course, will be approaching the gay community itself, as well as the Democratic Party and all the candidates. We will be seeking endorsements from the party, which, as I said earlier, we received today, from the candidates who are running for office, and then within the community, from the business part of our community, as well as every other organization in our community. Individuals can help a great deal by calling Coloradans for fairness and equality, and their number is, I understand, being displayed somewhere.
It's going to be on the bulletin board.
Okay. And they will be ever so happy to involve people in phone calling and canvassing and in gathering signatures. Remember, we need that little petition signed for that little item that says domestic partnership is not marriage. So we're going to be prepared so that if Mr. Perkins and Mr. Lundberg step into the Secretary of State's office at 4 o'clock on the final day, we will be sitting there with our same 100,000 signatures and go immediately to the desk. But to do that, we will need the help of all of the community and all of those who are allies in this cause. It's not just the gay community, it's not just Democrats. It's the religious community, the interfaith community, it's Republicans, and it's independents. And all of them, we need assistance from all of them. Coloradans for Fairness and Equality would accept willingly all the help they can get.
I bet. What is your organization going to be doing for this November election?
Well, one of the primary areas where we will focus are endorsements from religious congregations. We'll continue to grow our membership in Colorado Clergy for Equality in Marriage, and also work with other clergy who may not be with us in terms of marriage equality, but in terms of their own social justice commitments, can support domestic partnerships. And so we'll continue to work primarily within the religious community. And one of the primary things I think we can do is really speak out and say it is because of our faith, not in spite of it, that we're committed to civil rights and social justice in our country. That's an important word to get out, and so I think we play a role that way, so that people know that there are a variety of religious perspectives, and the one often in many mainstream expressions that is portrayed as the religious position is never mine, and I'm religious, and so that's what we can do, is make sure that the religious voice, the progressive religious voice, is heard as we move toward the election as well. So
that all voices are heard.
That's right.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you both for joining us tonight. It's been very illuminating. I'm getting excited for November to get here. I'll definitely do my part. Thank you both, and I'll see you in November.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Good to be here.
And watch the bulletin board so that you can sign up for help. Thanks very much.
There's a lot going on in our community, especially since summer's here. So why not take a look at the bulletin board and find out something that's right for you?
end.
We have to stop it. We cannot go through losing another generation of young people.
We put our heart and soul into our work. I really think that HIV vaccines are the way to go.
Vaccines are the answer for HIV, and I'm so pleased to be here doing this.
Anything I can do to help is important.
With every volunteer, there is hope.
I think it's really important to make sure that you understand everything, all the procedures. It's okay. Do it.
Global warming is an issue that can affect all of us drastically. Former Vice President Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, is about the same topic.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. The scientific consensus is that we are causing global warming. I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. This is Patagonia 75 years ago and the same glacier today. This is Mount Kilimanjaro 30 years ago and last year. Within the decade, there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro. This is really not a political issue so much as a moral issue. The temperature increases are taking place all over the world, and that's causing stronger storms.
This is the biggest crisis in the history of this country.
Early this morning, Hurricane Katrina slammed into New Orleans.
Is it possible that we should prepare against other threats besides terrorists?
From Paramount Classics comes a film that has shocked audiences everywhere they've seen it.
The Arctic is experiencing faster melting. If this were to go, sea level worldwide would go up 20 feet. This is what would happen in Florida. Around Shanghai, home to 40 million people. The area around Calcutta, 60 million. Here's Manhattan. The World Trade Center Memorial would be underwater. Think of the impact of a couple 100,000 refugees, and then imagine 100 million. We have to act together to solve this global crisis. Our ability to live is what is at stake.
An Inconvenient Truth is playing at the Mayan. We'll give 10 pairs of tickets to callers 7 through 16. Just call the movie line at 303-861-0829. Well, that's all we could pack into this edition of Colorado Outspoken. Thanks for watching, and remember, you can see us here and other editions of Colorado Outspoken in its entirety on our website at coloradooutspoken.org. We'll be back on Sunday, July 30th at 10 p.m. right here on KBDI Channel 12. I'm Stephen Montez. Good night.